In this video, I'm going to show you how to build this 3-bay DIY composting system so you can start creating hot compost like a pro. I've been composting for a long time, over 5 years, and over this time I've learned a ton of different strategies that allow me to recycle all of the things that I produce on my property and create compost that I'm using to feed my garden, which is what makes it so productive, luscious, and grows some amazing quality produce. And the most important thing that is needed in order to create quality compost is a composting system. There are tons of different ways to make compost, but the way that I love and have found to create the most quality compost is hot composting. And this is my old compost bay over here. And you're probably thinking, hey, you already have a compost bin. Why don't you just use that? Well, one of the reasons why is because I'm going to be creating something special over here very, very soon. And I also need to fix my shed because the walls are leaking. So all of this has to come down. But I've also learned some lessons from using this specific composting system. And I'm going to apply those mistakes to my new composting bay. So that way I have an even better system. And last year I built our new chicken coop right here, which has some amazing features. And one of them is the clean out door, where I can literally just drop this door down and pull out all of the chicken bedding that I need. And it is one of the most important ingredients that I use in my compost. So now I'm going to be moving my new composting system right here. So I'll literally just be able to take it all out and put it right into the compost bin. It's going to make maintenance so much easier, and I'll have all of the materials that I need to create my compost on hand. Last year, I also tried composting in a quick pallet bay composting system that I made. And don't get me wrong, it worked great, but you know that it's not here right now. I just recently took it down because it was just falling apart. The heat treated lumber is pretty good. It's a great option if you're trying to make a composting system on a budget, but it didn't last very long at all, especially because I also have my chickens back here who are digging and scratching and they're just continuing to bury the system. I needed some materials that were more durable. And that's exactly why I'm going to be creating the new composting based system today that is going to be utilizing cedar and specifically cedar fence pickets that are going to last at least 7, 8, 9, maybe up to 15 years. And the reason why I know this is because I've been using cedar fence pickets as slats on my existing composting system that I have against my shed for the last 5 years, and they're still holding up strong. In fact, some of them were even buried under the soil. I just picked them up and they're still perfectly fine. So I know the system that I'm going to be creating today is going to last years and years and years, and that's exactly what I need. I am really happy that I was able to do a trial run in this location though, because I know I can make some high quality compost here. At first I was really nervous because when it rains really heavily, this is kind of where all of the water settles because it's the low point in our yard. And you don't want to have that settling of all of that water wherever you're making compost, especially hot compost, because you want to make sure that it's an aerobic environment. You need air for all the microbes to work and break down that compost for you. And if you just have water sitting here, you're going to create an anaerobic environment or an environment that lacks oxygen, and you're just not going to create compost, and you're just going to have a wet, stinky pile of rotting material that you also don't really want to add to your garden. Another reason why I want to have my composting bay system right here is because my chicken run door is right there. And on the other side of that chicken run door is the rest of my property, where I'm going to be mowing the grass, I'm going to be weeding the garden, I'm going to be getting some garden scraps, and all of that I want to bring through that fence, through that gate, and be able to roll it right here to this compost-based system. So this really is an ideal location. My chicken coop's right there, pull the materials out, put it in the composting system. I load up my wheelbarrow with all the different scraps that I have from the garden, put it in the composting system. And it's also not in your face. So it's somewhere that's easily accessible, doesn't have a lot of moisture, and somewhere where you can put it and store these materials and it not be an absolute eyesore. Plus, I have the advantage of this being our chicken run. So my chickens are also going to be back here, and they're going to be able to jump into these compost bays and just help to mix up all these materials. So they're going to help to create even better compost more quickly. So let's get to work. And today I'm going to be creating a 3-bay system. I have found this to work best for me because I basically have 2 bins that are active, and I can use another bin for storage of materials like leaves or grass, whatever I need for when I need it. Because when you're creating hot compost, it's important to have all of the materials on hand and create one large pile at once, because that is going to heat up and really start that breakdown, that composting process. And if you can keep it moving, that is what's going to allow you to make the highest quality compost as quickly as possible. So I did some prep already with the materials that I'm using. I'm going to be using some 2x4 lumber in order to create a main structure, and then I'm going to be filling it in with the cedar fence pickets in order to create a nice open airy environment that's also going to look nice as well. So what I want to do is kind of just lay everything out first, make sure the ground is stable, maybe do a little bit of digging and leveling, but I want to get everything laid out, see how big this system is actually going to be before I finalize the position, and then maybe reinforce some stuff as we go along. So I've got my 2x4s, and I basically made 4 corners that are cut into this L shape right here. So I just took one 8-foot piece, cut it in half, so they're 4 feet tall, and I screwed them together to make an L. So I've got 4 2x4s that I use to make the 4 corners of the compost base system, and I'm just going to lay them out right here so that way I can get a good idea of basically how big the system is going to be. And since I'm creating a 3-bay system, I'm basically going to have 2 break points. So I'll have 1 bay here, 1 bay here, and another bay here. So I also created these T's that look like this in order to separate the different bays. So that way I can attach the cedar fence pickets on this side and extend it out to create that 3-sided shape. And for the walls themselves, I'm going to be using cedar fence pickets that I cut down to 4-foot lengths. And you've probably heard me say 4 feet a few times now. And I have found that 4-foot by 4-foot compost bins, so they're 4 feet wide, 4 feet deep, and also 4 feet tall, create the best compost. Because as I said, you want to load it up with as much material as you possibly can. And that is what's going to allow you to make some really high quality compost. So what I'm going to do now is just take these pickets, just one, and lay them down on the ground in between these structures. So that way I know how long the system is actually going to be. I know one of my limits is over here because I've got a plant that I want to keep. So I'm pretty much going to align the very edge of the system here. And then we'll kind of work based off of that. And I really love projects like this because it's not like I'm creating anything technical. I'm not building a bench or a chair. It's just a very rudimentary woodworking project. The dimensions don't have to be perfect. The cuts don't have to be perfect. And I can just be more creative in this overall process, which is really just relieving sometimes. So the layout's looking pretty good. But one thing I'm noticing is this ground is really squishy. Because as I talked about, water can settle here when it rains a lot. And we actually had a pretty big rainstorm last night, and I'm not really seeing a lot of water here, which is good because we've been building up the soil. We've got some trees planted here now, so they're probably just sucking all of that up, which is even better for me. But this soil here is still really squishy. So I think what I'm going to do is basically dig some of it up and add some cinder blocks underneath, so that way I can elevate this whole system and make sure it's level. I want it level too. I don't want this thing sinking and rocking into the soil as I use it. I want it to be nice and solid. I want this thing to last for years. I'm gonna kill 2 birds with, whoa, not that bird. I'm gonna kill 2 birds with 1 stone with this because I need to move all of these cinder blocks anyway because I've got my shed wall that's popping off. I mean, it's a pretty old shed, so you know, maintenance, it's required. But I'm just going to use some of these cinder blocks that I have here, pull them out, and create a nice sturdy base for this composting system. I really do try to reuse materials as much as I can. And it's funny that I have all of these cinder blocks over here. These cinder blocks made up our very first garden, like 8 years ago. And after we took that garden down, we brought them over here to make our first composting system. And now they're getting recycled again in this project. And I'm also going to be using them for an updated rainwater collection system that I'm going to be creating off of this shed. So if you're loving these DIY projects, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel and turn on that notification button so you get notified every single time we create a video, so you can keep making these homesteading DIY projects like this and really bringing your homestead to the next level. It's my goal to be as efficient as possible on the homestead. I've got a busy life. I've got 3 kids, I've got a full-time job, and I'm making all of these videos. So it really is important to me to make something or systems, build systems that allow me to be as efficient as possible and also make them work well and pretty. Like, if I'm going to be using them and coming out here and looking at them every single day, I want to be proud when I come out, and I also want to enjoy looking at everything that I've created. So thanks for coming along with me on these videos. It really is a blast to make them, and I really am just doing these to help you out. So if there's something that you're looking for or something that you want to create to support your homestead, let me know in the comments. All right, I've noticed that this is the lower section of my property here. It's you could see it sloping down. So what I'm going to do is place these 2 cinder blocks first, get these positioned, and then I'm going to make everything level off of that, which is going to require me to, dig a little trench down here just to make sure that all these cinder blocks are level. But this little bit of extra effort is going to make such a significant difference in the long run. This is what's going to help these compost bays last 15 years, hopefully, right? So I'm just going to move this out of the way. And before I set these in stone too, I want to make sure that I'm giving a little bit of space off of my fence here, so that way I can at least get behind the compost bin. So I'm just going to stand here, go like shoulder width. I think I want to set that first cinder block like right here. And you can see how easily the soil is just moving around. We're going to get this nice and level, and then we'll just set all of them based off of this. To actually assemble the compost bins, I'm going to be using some 1 5/8 inch deck screws. And I'm going to start doing it now because I feel like it's actually going to help me get a better understanding of where all of my cinder blocks need to be. So I'm going to start off with this bottom one and just get this picket lined up at the very bottom and make sure it's flush. And you do not have to do all of this work if you don't want to. You can just sit them down on the ground and make them as level as you can get them. But I'm a little OCD and I want to make sure it's right and level and it looks good. So I'm just gonna throw this one right in the bottom here. And at least I'll have a rigid structure to work with, because I don't really want this cinder block sticking out the front of my compost bay. I want it nice and flush with the front. So having something sturdier to work with is definitely going to be a lot easier. So I'll set that one in there, and then I'll do the same thing with the front right here. And that's going to make it a lot easier to get this thing moving. The reason why I created these posts to look like T's is so that way I can attach the cedar fence pickets to the back, but also to create the dividing walls of each compost bay. So I'm going to screw this one to the back here, and then I'll be able to take another picket and screw it to this wall right here in order to make the sides. So this is a really simple and effective solution in order to create the structure, the overall structure of the compost bay. So since I'm taking all of this time to make this compost bin level, take a couple seconds and just make sure that the top picket is flush with the top of the support brace here, and then just attach it with your deck screws, and this is going to make a really, really nice finished product. Look how good this looks already, and this is just the main structure. Now at this point, it's going to go together really fast. And to finish up the sides, I'm going to be taking some cedar fence pickets and just spacing them relatively evenly across the whole panel. I'll probably start with the middle and go all the way around, and then just space them out on either side. I want to make sure that I'm leaving air gaps, because as I said before, air is really important to making good compost. So we don't want this to be completely enclosed. We want air to be able to flow in and out. So one of the things that I was noticing as I was putting these sides together is it's a little bit wobbly. So what I think I'm gonna do is basically trim out the whole top here with 2x4, and that should lock everything in place. And the last thing that I'm gonna do to finalize this project is create some slats for the front. And this isn't really necessary. You can leave the bins completely open, but I do have chickens and I know what they do to compost piles, and they're just gonna completely push all of this material out of the compost bin, and I want it to stay inside. So another benefit of making these T-posts for the center sections is now I have a wall that these pickets are gonna be able to push up against. So all I'm gonna do is create these little channels that I can slide these fence pickets down in order to build a wall right here. So I set one of the pickets in place at the very bottom, and all the extra lumber that I had left over, I'm obviously gonna reuse for other projects, probably make some birdhouses, but I just ripped them down into these thinner sections, and I'm gonna use them to create a channel for this fence picket to slide in. And I don't want it to be too tight, so I'm just gonna leave like a little bit of space there, get this set. It looks pretty good, enough wiggle room for me to adjust it. And then I'm just gonna screw them on. Check this out too. I left a little bit of space so that way I could slide the fence picket in, but I left the dog ear portion up here so it makes like a little ramp for me to help me guide that picket into place. So now I could just slide this up and it pops right out. And there we go. And we can do the same thing to put it in. Acts as a little guide right there. I can even rest it there and then it falls into place. Well, I don't know about you, but now I'm really excited to start making a fresh batch of homemade compost. And remember, if there are any other projects that you want to see me build on the homestead, let me know down in the comments. And other than that, I can't wait to see you in the next one.